And as I compiled a list this week of all the things and all the responsibilities of a father, and I'm sure I did not exhaust even a quarter of them, one conclusion came to my mind. God. God. God has to be my example of how to give instruction. God has to be my example of how to raise, how to love, how to guide. God has to be my example of how to lead, how to instruct, and how to correct. God has to be my greatest example of how to have compassion and how to discipline. Because when I think of a father, and the father who I need to be, and the fathers out here this morning who you need to be, a biblical father follows an example of a good father. So I'd like to instruct your minds and direct your minds over to Proverbs chapter 3, where we look at this idea of a biblical father and what a biblical father looks like. If we understand who God is as our father, how do we then, as we instruct ourselves to apply this principle to us as biblical fathers? In Proverbs chapter 1, 2, and 3, and even into chapter 4, and various times throughout the book of Proverbs, we see this instruction that Solomon is giving to his son. In all of my wisdom, Solomon says, I want you to understand, son, how to live and how to function and what to be aware of. And I'm going to try to lead you, and I'm going to try to guide you, and I'm going to try to warn you and keep you away from certain things. And I want you to try to go towards other things, to guide them in a way that God says, this is how you should be, and this is how you should live. I think back on my raising and the great father I had. And I think of how many more times I would have been in trouble if I wouldn't have listened to my father. If I wouldn't have listened to his wisdom and his instruction, even though, as I know, and you can probably imagine, there were days I pushed back and I found out on my own, and I wish I wouldn't have had to sometimes. If I would have just listened to my father's instruction, what to do and what not to do. My father was a great example of a biblical father, one who mimicked God the Father. Everybody seems to want to define what a father looks like. Paul Harvey did the same thing. Paul Harvey says this: a father never feels entirely worthy of the worship in a child's eyes. He's never quite the hero in his daughter that his daughter thinks, and never quite the man his son believes him to be. And this worries him sometimes. So he works too hard to try and smooth the rough places in the road for those of his own who will follow him. A father is a thing that gets very angry when the first school grades aren't as good as he thinks they should be. He scolds his son, though he knows it may be his teacher's fault. A father is a thing is what gives daughters away to other men who aren't nearly good enough so they can have grandchildren who are smarter than anybody else's. I don't know where fathers go when they die, he says. But I have an idea that after a good rest, wherever it is, he won't be happy unless there's work to do. He won't just sit on a cloud and wait for the girl he's loved and the children she bore. He'll be busy there too, repairing the stars, oiling the gates, improving the streets, and smoothing the way. You can pull up many different people who have tried to define what a father is. But I believe the greatest definition of a father is found in the pages of the Bible, of what a biblical father looks like. A biblical father, number one, makes time for their kids. You look at various passages throughout the Bible, and it's always about time. It's always about what a father does with their kids. You could look at passages like Deuteronomy chapter 6, how he instructs a parent to walk by the way and to teach the commandments of God, whether they're sitting down or walking by the way or whether they're laying down. Spending time with our kids is so valuable. And I think in the fast-paced world we live in, we miss it, dads. We miss it. In fact, I found an old article from the Wall Street Journal in 1991, and it said this as they reported what a father had said. He said, 10 years ago, I told my wife and children to just wait until I got established, and then I could spend more time with them. Now, 10 years later, I want to get involved with them, but I'm finding out they're more comfortable without me. Fathers have such a huge responsibility. Number one, our responsibility as Christian fathers is to teach our children about God. It is our responsibility. It's nobody else's, guys. Ours. As spiritual leaders in our home, it is our responsibility to make sure our children know God. To know of His steadfast love and His might and His power. To know of His grace and His mercy. To know who He is and why He does the things He does. It's our responsibility to teach them about Christ and the sacrifice that He made. It's our responsibility to guide them towards those teachers who can teach them those things. To encourage them to be at church on Sunday morning in Bible classes. Fathers, it's our responsibility. It's our responsibility to be with them when they ride their first bike. And it's our responsibility to be at their baseball games. It's our responsibility to watch them drive away to college, and it's our responsibility to be there when they call and say, guess what, Dad? I'm pregnant. It's our responsibility to give our daughters away. Dads, it's our responsibility to make time for our children. We have to take this seriously. One of our major pitfalls in our culture today is we don't have dads who have been responsible to make time for their children. And we're relying on everybody else to make time for our children. And therefore, they're not receiving biblical instruction like they should be receiving biblical instruction from us. They're receiving instruction from whoever else. We have a great responsibility as biblical fathers to spend time with them. In Proverbs chapter 4, look at what Solomon says in verse 11. He says, I have taught you the way of wisdom. But look at the very next line. I have led you in the paths of uprightness. Leading takes what? Spending time together. It's not only good enough to tell them what to do, but it's to show them how to do it. We can remember back maybe when our children were young, or maybe some of you who have little ones that way, grabbing their hand and walking beside them. Harper Perry is just starting to walk, and it's the cutest thing. It's funny, when a baby learns to walk and they walk like that, it's really cute. If you walk like that, people would worry. But you remember what that felt like as a father, as a parent, when your little one started to walk and you held them by your hand and you were slow with them? And you took real small steps with them because you wanted to be there with them, guiding them, leading them. Sometimes I think the analogy of a baby learning to walk is very efficient in our idea of how a father should instruct their children in baby steps. Not expecting too much or too little from them, but making the time for our kids is what biblical fathers do.